Hey guys, Owen here from UCC Students Union again. This is kind of a long video blog. I have like loads to get through because it was a really busy week last week. So I'm going to talk really quickly so I can try and get through all of it. One of the things I just wanted to tell you that I have is this thing called Discipline Committee. Panel meets every so often when there's a disciplinary proceeding against a student that comes up, and I sit on that. Now obviously that's extremely confidential. I can't go into anything even remotely about what it's about, but I just wanted to give you an idea that that's something that I have to do every so often as well when there's a disciplinary case. They're few and far between, very rarely result in an expulsion, but it happens every so often. Another thing, I was at the New Bar committee meeting. I was participating in that last week, and the general manager of the student centre informed us that there are going to be some new refurbishments. So I'm sure that you probably noticed the windows being painted and some of the walls being painted. There's going to be a bit more sort of a jazzing up of the couching situation and the decorations around the place, so that should be interesting. Also Wednesday last week I was dying sick, but I went into this governing body committee on students. It's the oversight committee for how students are treated within the university. And at that I brought forward a report on the registration fee from a student perspective. Very simply, the registration fee, how the money is allocated from the registration fee is dictated by something called the Framework for Good Practice, which was instituted by the Higher Education Authority in January of 1998. For 12 years now, that framework has not been implemented in any university in the country, but particularly not in UCC. And that in that framework it prescribes a few things that should happen. There should be a student finance committee that oversees the allocation of money to clubs, societies in the union. There should be a central forum which debates how the charge is allocated to student services and to what student services it's allocated towards. There should be an annual report on the allocation of the fee to the different services that's given to students and things like that, and it should happen in consultation with students. That's the big one. So none of those things had happened, with the exception of the student finance committee, but not explicitly in UCC. So we're moving forward on that, and the governing body committee on students requests now that the new central forum, which is being set up to discuss how the student services charge is allocated to student services, would make a report to the governing body committee on students in terms of how the registration fee is spent. So that was an interesting development, and it was a good positive outcome. Also last week I did interviews for work placements within the Students' Union. Next year Students' Union have decided that they'd like to take on more students that are currently looking for work placements, and so some of the work placement times would run into my chairman office as well, so I happily obliged, and we interviewed people from the Department of Government last week, so that was interesting. Also last week I had a meeting on the Mardyke Pavilion development. The Mardyke Pavilion, as you know, is quite simply a disgrace for any of you who have had to train it, which is it's outside of the Mardyke Arena. It's a little sort of hut behind the pitch, and the training facilities are really bad. The changing facilities, the bar is pretty useless as well. So there's a capital development program to totally jazz that up now, and that's being paid out of a capital development fund that the university has. The central forum then also met later on that day for the first time. So we went through sort of what the basis for the setting up the central forum on the registration fee is, and how the allocation framework would work. Also, we sort of came up with a few more student services that weren't included in it as of yet, and to sort of look at how it's kind of broken down and how much sort of this is going to cost the university and things like that. Sort of defining what the student services charge should be paying. I also met with the general manager of the Mardyke Arena last week to talk about lost time that was lost during the flood, and how we were going to give that time back to students, to reimburse students for that business interruption as student members to the Mardyke Arena. So one of the solutions that I came up with was that in a graduate membership, that once a student graduates from UCC for the next 5 years, that when they buy a graduate membership, that instead of getting just 12 months, that they get an extra 3 months for free, because that was about approximately the amount of time that the flood put the Mardyke out of action. So that is a proposal I'm making to the general manager that he might bring to the board of directors at his discretion for approval. So I sit on the board of directors, so hopefully that's something that we'll be able to give back to people who missed out on time because of the flood, who really ardently go to the gym. Okay, I met I was sitting at a quality promotion committee meeting, and I'm getting quite concerned actually in a quality sense in the university about the amount of time and the amount of money and the amount of resources generally that's invested in teaching in the university. I think that teaching is really losing out, particularly undergraduate teaching and learning. Sorry, that's my phone. Particularly undergraduate teaching. I know that the Quality Promotion Committee is going to do a teaching and learning quality review of the institution, just to see how different departments score on the teaching side of the university, and I think that will give us a really good insight into how much money we're diverting away from undergraduate teaching within the university. Also at the weekend, over the weekend I hosted, UCC Students Union hosted a USI event, the Union of Students in Ireland. It's the national union. We hosted the National Council, which is the executive body of USI. There's also other councils that go on at the time, so one of them that was there was the area council. One of the interesting things that was discussed for the southern area was trying to coordinate the different WAG weeks, Raise and Give weeks, college weeks, charity weeks, so they all occur at the same time. What actually happens, one of the biggest problems that we have around the country, is that when WAG weeks or Raise and Give weeks are going on, that people travel between them, and when you're in another college you obviously don't really care that much, and that's when antisocial behaviour and criminal activity becomes a problem. Just to give you an insight, I think it was 13 arrests that happened in Raise and Give week this year. I think it was 3 of those were UCC students. The rest of them were other students. So trying to coordinate that is something that's on the agenda. There was also a president's working group of presidents around the country, where we talked a little bit about crossover training, about training the new presidents coming in, the new sabbatical teams coming in, and making sure that they get the proper training, when they're getting trained in June. And we also had a bit of a discussion on Congress, on the USI Congress 2010, and how we implement some sort of code of conduct and to make sure that delegates behave appropriately when they're at a meeting. Just so you know, Congress costs UCC Students Union about €10,000 every year. It costs us a little bit less this year because of different ways that we try to reduce costs, but generally speaking, it's a lot of money because we're sending delegates to the Congress. So in my view, it has to be a serious affair. It has to be something very professional, and people have to take it seriously because we're investing a lot of money in it. So anyway, the last thing is the National Council, which actually occurred on the Saturday morning. In a National Council, there are officer reports, so the President of USI, the Education Officer of USI, the Welfare Officer, Deputy President, Equality Officer, all make reports to the National Council on what work they've been doing since the last National Council. And those officer reports were very well received. There was a few sort of things that we asked questions on, but generally speaking, they were satisfactory. Generally speaking, a lot of the officers do very good work. There's only a handful that really don't, and sometimes that causes a lot of contention. There was also a large discussion on the election that happened in Congress in 2010. It's been a very long sort of a controversy on the election in 2010 there back in April. So that is going to be an ongoing discussion, but I'm hoping that it resolves in the best interest of the organisation rather than the best interests of certain parties. And also there was elections of the Education Officer for next year, the Equality Officer, the LGBTRO, Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual and Transgender Rights Officer, and the Gender Equality Officer. Those were all resolved there on Saturday as well. So that's generally what went on last week. It was kind of a crazy week. I'm sorry this went on so long. I hope it actually uploads to YouTube now. So best luck with the exams. For those of you who are finishing this week, don't go too crazy. I'll probably see you out because it's kind of the last week that I have with students as well. From here on in, it's just sort of quiet summertime, and then I'm gone. So anyway, best of luck with everything, and we'll talk to you soon.